Identify the corporate psychopath. With the recent global financial crisis, management researchers are increasingly interested in investigating aspects of dark leadership in their attempt to explain the current financial and organizational turmoil around the world. The classification of psychopathic personality reportedly became that of sociopathic personality in 1952, and this was changed to antisocial personality in 1968, quickly 1988. The terms psychopath, sociopath, and antisocial personality are often used interchangeably in the popular press and are often confused even by psychologists, who thus do not speak the same language at each other when talking about the same personality disorders. Antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is defined as a pervasive pattern of disregard for, and violation of, the rights of others, and an inability or unwillingness to conform to what are considered the usual rules of society. The disorder is reported to involve a history of chronic antisocial behavior that begins before the age of 15 and continues well into adulthood. The disorder manifests as a regular pattern of antisocial and irresponsible behavior, as indicated by such things as academic failure, engagement in illegal activities, recklessness, poor job performance, and impulsive behavior. Symptoms include an inability to tolerate boredom, feeling victimized, and a diminished capacity for intimacy. Antisocial personality disorder is confused with psychopathy by some psychologists. More specifically, they associate it with criminal psychopathy. These psychologists wrongfully tend to see the antisocial personality disorder as a reflection largely of criminal-type behaviors rather than of the more callous and unemotional personality traits exhibited by psychopaths. Psychopaths may be antisocial, but only a minority of those diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder are also psychopaths. It is said that only about 25% of individuals classed as antisocial personalities will show psychopathic tendencies as well. There are said to be many roots to an antisocial personality, and psychopathy is reportedly only one of them. Psychopaths are thus a more specific group than are people with antisocial personality disorder. The focus on the antisocial elements of psychopathy leads to the overdiagnosis of psychopathy in criminal populations and the underdiagnosis of psychopathy in non-criminal populations. It is of interest to note that the violence of those with antisocial personality disorder typically differs from the violence of those with psychopathy. The violence of those with antisocial personality disorder is typically reactive, a response to frustration, whereas that of psychopaths is typically instrumental, directed towards a goal such as the acquisition of power or money. In other words, people with antisocial personality disorder get angry and violently lose their temper, while the violence of psychopaths is colder, more calculating, controlled, and directed towards a specific goal such as the acquisition of another person's goods or money. Leaders with antisocial personality disorder can apparently be both admired as rule breakers and feared as destructive personalities by their colleagues and those who work under them. Their behavior can be constructive in times when rapid change is necessary for an organization to survive, but appear destructive, dishonest, and unethical to others. Researchers say that many adults with antisocial personality disorder do not fulfill the criteria for psychopathy because they do not have the callous, unemotional traits necessary to be counted as psychopaths. In conclusion, then, antisocial personality disorder overlaps with and is correlated with psychopathy, but it is far from being an identical or synonymous construct. Psychopaths and psychopathy. In common usage, a psychopath is a person with a personality disorder characterized by extreme callousness who is liable to behave antisocially or violently in getting their own way. A more psychologically oriented definition of psychopathy comes from the Dictionary of Psychology, which defines it as a mental disorder roughly equivalent to antisocial personality disorder but with an emphasis on the affective and interpersonal traits such as superficial charm, pathological lying, egocentricity, lack of remorse and callousness. Psychopaths are commonly said to be relatively immune to treatment and to socialization. Antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy appear to be overlapping, but are clearly different constructs. Treating them as different constructs adds to the definitional clarity in this area. Corporate psychopaths. Corporate psychopaths are simply those psychopaths who work in corporations. Corporate psychopaths are clever and charming enough to avoid detection, and do not conflict with society, and therefore avoid prison, and hence a revised definition, other than antisocial personality disorder, has to be used for these more sophisticated psychopaths. Antisocial personality disorder characterizes the behavioral aspects of criminal psychopaths rather than the innate personality factors. Because the majority of studies of psychopathy have been with incarcerated populations, psychopathy has been confounded with measures of criminality. Therefore, the construct of a psychopathic personality should not be contaminated with criminality and socially deviant behavior. Again, it is emphasized that there are psychopaths who do not engage in criminal behavior and can function well in society. Further, there is to be distinguished between unsuccessful psychopaths, those who have criminal convictions, and successful psychopaths, those who have no criminal convictions or no illegal antisocial behavior. Corporate psychopaths are thus opportunistic corporate careerists who lack any concern for the consequences of their actions and are totally ruthless in their pursuit of their own aims and ambitions. Psychopaths may exhibit behavior consistent with antisocial personality disorder, such as interpersonal violence. These antisocial people would tend to be classed as criminal psychopaths, the most studied group of psychopaths. Other psychopaths do not exhibit such antisocial behavior, and these people could be called successful psychopaths or corporate psychopaths. They have not been the subject of much research as they are passed over by many psychopathy measures that rely on antisocial markers to identify psychopaths. Psychotics. Psychotics are people suffering from a mental disorder which has made them lose touch with reality. In everyday parlance, they are mad rather than bad. They are not the same as psychopaths. Although rarely the two disorders may coexist in one individual, in which case, being mad and bad, they really would be dangerous to know. In this latter case, the person would probably exhibit symptoms such as irrational violence that would preclude their rise to any leadership position. Sociopaths and sociopathy. Sociopaths are defined as those people who display socially deviant behavior because of the way they have been socialized in their environment, which could be a result of growing up in a criminal family, for example, or in the society of criminal peers. In this case, the usual norms of society have not been taught or learned. Instead, the attitudes and behaviors of their criminal subculture have been learned, and these are deemed normal within that subculture but not within wider society. Such a person is treatable because they can be taught what the usual norms are and shown the harmful effects of their actions on others, because they have a conscience and a normal capacity for guilt and empathy. It is their behavior that needs to be modified via learning the values of society. Sociopathy is thus an antisocial orientation which results from environmental, socio-cultural and familial factors which are modified by an individual's personality. Psychopathy, on the other hand, is more deeply rooted in an individual's core personality, as affected by their environmental, socio-cultural and familial backgrounds. Sociopaths, who are defined as people who have been socialized into behavior which is considered immoral or antisocial, may also be psychopathic, but most have a conscience and so would not be classed as psychopathic. People with antisocial personality disorder may be antisocial because they are psychopathic or sociopathic or for some other reason, such as being psychotic or as a reaction to early-stage parental rejection. Acquired sociopathy, acquired psychopathy. The term acquired sociopathy was introduced to characterize people who became aggressive, unemotional and callous after physical damage to the orbitofrontal cortex of the brain. They are less likely to display autonomic responses to visual emotional stimuli and have problems in curtailing their violent responses. These people, having suffered physical brain damage in the area of the orbitofrontal cortex due to strokes, accidents or neurological disease, for example, display such behavioral characteristics as high levels of aggressiveness, lack of concern for social and moral rules, emotional blunting and irresponsibility. They are also more likely to judge moral violations as acceptable behavior than non-damaged people are. After frontal lobe injury, these people display socially inappropriate behavior and aggressive behavior which is described as psychopathic-like. These findings highlight the neurological aspects of psychopathy. It can be argued that this definition of acquired sociopathy should more correctly be termed or is more in line with the term acquired psychopathy because the syndrome is physically acquired through brain damage rather than acquired through socialization. The brain damage is thought to interfere with the executive emotional system of the brain that allows control over appropriate responses to threats. The condition of acquired sociopathy is extremely rare. Narcissists and narcissism. Since Freud coined the term, a narcissist has been regarded as someone who loves themselves too much for their own good. Psychologists generally differentiate between people with narcissistic traits, which are deemed to be commonly present in a normal population, and those who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder. The latter are people who are narcissistic in a maladaptive and extreme manner. They are said to be arrogant and aggressive in terms of their personality styles. Narcissists are people who are concerned with displaying and acknowledging their own talent and brilliance and who have a desire to be admired and acknowledged to the exclusion of others around them. People with high levels of narcissism are arrogant, self-centered, duplicitous and self-enhancing, and they have a sense of superiority over others. They are said to be exhibitionist and exploitative and to have dominant personalities. One group of researchers identified narcissists as people characterized by being grandiose, having fantasies of ideal love, perfect beauty, or unlimited or unrealistic success, idealizing or devaluing other people, having a sense of entitlement or displaying interpersonal exploitativeness, lacking empathy, being oversensitive to criticism and having a need for attention or admiration. Narcissists are said to lack human values, to be self-absorbed and to have a need to control others, as well as to make management decisions that are not in the best interests of organizations, their employees or other stakeholders. While psychopathy measures correlate positively with both narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, there are some differences among these. A psychopath differs from a person classed as a narcissistic personality type because, according to clinical psychologists, narcissists do have emotions and feelings, and are therefore bothered by their own behavior. Psychopaths, on the other hand, with their lack of emotions or conscience, are not troubled by their own behavior. The Narcissistic Personality Inventory measures persistent attention-seeking, extreme vanity, excessive self-focus and exploitativeness in personal relationships. Narcissistic leaders are reported to be charismatic and to be able to inspire their followers, but are also poor listeners who are nevertheless sensitive to criticism, whereas psychopaths are not sensitive to criticism. Both types lack empathy with others, and both thrive in chaotic times. But narcissistic leaders often want to change their personalities because they know that their behavior is unacceptable or hurtful to others and they want to be liked. Psychopaths could not care less about hurting others and have been shown, for example, not to take the pain of others into account when making moral judgments and even to get a thrill from hurting others. Further, psychopaths see no reason to change their personalities. Narcissists have grandiose but unstable concepts of themselves, together with an inflated sense of entitlement and a tendency towards establishing their superiority. They can have fantasies of ideal love, whereas psychopaths have an incapacity for love or deep emotions. Researchers found that psychopathy was more strongly related to aggressive responses than narcissism was. It is said, psychopaths have a narcissistic view of their own importance but combine this with other characteristics such as manipulativeness, ruthlessness and a lack of conscience or emotion to make up a personality which has many more different facets than narcissism. It is hypothesized that narcissism may be more associated with females than with males. However, it is usually agreed that psychopathy is more evident among males than among females, and that these overlapping but separate constructs may just possibly be gender-related in ways that have not yet been fully explored. Machiavellians and Machiavellianism. Machiavellianism has commonalities with corporate psychopathy in that it has no reference to moral standards and promotes the idea that the end justifies the means. It also advocates a cynical, political approach to management, including the use of a fraudulent persona when necessary, entailing the use of apparent honesty, charm and tact to gain advantage, and the use of force if necessary as a means to achieve desired ends. Machiavellianism is thus defined by the presence of high levels of manipulative behavior in a personality. Machiavelli was a 16th-century Italian political strategist who based his writings on observations of his patron, Cesare Borgia. Machiavelli advocated the use of power as a tool, recommending that leaders be ruthless like a lion and cunning like a fox. A Machiavellian is characterized as someone who lacks concern with conventional morality, is without interpersonal affect and gross psychopathology, and has a low ideological commitment, who is willing and able to manipulate others through any means, including the use of deceit. Machiavellianism is thus the name for the ruthless and selfish approach which was advocated by Machiavelli in his treatise, The Prince. This definition of Machiavellianism does not imply a lack of conscience as displayed by psychopaths, but it has broad similarities to many definitions of psychopathy. Machiavellians pursue strategies that promote self-interest, using deception, flattery and emotional detachment to manipulate and exploit social and interpersonal relationships for their own ends. Machiavellianism has also been described as a strategy of socially manipulating other people for personal gain. The measure for Machiavellianism is referred to as the Machiavellian or Mach scale. High Macs tend to detach themselves from ethical considerations and to manipulate and use others to profit themselves. Machiavellianism, narcissism and psychopathy have been described as the dark triad of malevolent personalities. Psychopaths have the ruthlessness, charm and cunning to get to the top of any organization they are in. They ruthlessly get rid of any opposition. Machiavellians might also get there, but they might not quite make it because they lack the total ruthlessness of a corporate psychopath. Narcissists may always be too obviously egotistical to get promoted unopposed. Criminal psychopaths and sociopaths, and those with antisocial personality disorder and dissocial personality, might be too noticeably and overtly aggressive to be promoted. Finally, psychotics are probably just too obviously delusional to rise far in organizations.